Welcome back to another edition of the Hart2Heart Podcast. My guest today is Candice Horbacz. You may know her from Chat with Candice, which is a very popular podcast. So Candice, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I wanted to chat with you, for a few different reasons. I've seen you on a bunch of podcasts, like we were talking about before the show. You seem to be giving a lot of people really good insight into relationships and things like that. And, that's kind of, why I wanted to chat with you today. But just before we get started, maybe you can give the audience just a little bit of a brief background about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the host of the Chatting with Candice podcast. The topics range depending on like whatever rabbit hole I tend to find myself in. But the main area, I don't even want to say expertise, but just like from the people that I've talked to, I've just absorbed an immense amount of information is like polarity, relationships, sex, and so like that has been like most of the episodes the last probably like 5 or 6 months. I was in the adult industry for about like 6 years. That is usually like the spicy talking point that kind of gets the ball rolling with everything. I've been out since 2017. So some people would say that gives me some kind of leg to stand on when it comes to like sex and relationships, and other people think it immediately disqualifies. So pick your poison, I guess, with that one.
Yeah, well, I think, the advice you've given has been, excellent. And I don't think that, you'd be getting all these invitations to all these popular podcasts, if the advice that you're giving out wasn't. So, I think you're doing a fantastic job. And that's why I wanted to chat with you today. So, one place I wanted to start, talking about relationships is like, it seems like for women, and not maybe for men sometimes too, but for women, like connection is always the issue. Women are always looking for like more connection in a relationship. And so, if you had to give advice to men on, first, maybe you can define like what is connection is, because some men may not even know like what they're even trying to, do when they're trying to foster connection. But, what is connection and why is it such an issue in most modern day relationships, do you find?
I think everyone wants connection. I think it just probably shows up different for men and for women, and women have been allowed to express their emotional needs for a lot longer than men have, at least culturally speaking. So I wouldn't say that men don't need it or don't like thrive when they do have a deep connection. I think both parties do. It's just like what's allowed and what is like emotionally available, because I think a lot of guys will just shut that off too. That's a huge talking point with a lot of like the manosphere conversations is you only want respect and that's it. You don't want love. You don't want anything deep. And I was like, I don't know what kind of men you're hanging out with, but the ones that I have been around, like my friends, they want all of the things. But for women, and again, this goes both ways, is like knowing your love language. So Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this a lot. And you can present something to someone with the best intention. Like, let's say you're offering them a strawberry smoothie and you make it with so much love, and like that's your love language is like gift giving. So I made this thing for you and I'm going to give it to you. Well, I don't know that you're allergic to strawberries, right? So I'm giving you this thing and you're like having to like chug it and then go take a Benadryl, and then you're just building up resentment and annoyance, and like you're not able to receive that love because our wires are crossed. So the first thing that I would always say is find out your love language and your partner's love language, and these can change over time. Mine have been pretty steady. Like mine are physical touch and quality time. Those have always been my top two. And then I feel like a lot of men's physical touch as well. But it's a quick little like date night activity you can do, and then you can learn more about your partner, because you're like, I didn't know acts of service meant so much to you. Okay, like I'll be able to do that, and then you'll be able to receive like my love in that way. Or if it's words of affirmation. So do that little test, figure out what you are and what your partner is. And that's a good stepping stone, because if I'm keep presenting you something and you're not receiving it because it doesn't mean anything to you, not in like a bad way, it's just not how you really receive love, like that's going to be the first block when it comes to connection. Another one is our devices. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I go out to a restaurant or I see a couple and they're out for a walk, and there is like there's zero connection happening even on a physical plane. Everyone's on their phone the whole time, constantly being distracted. And I think that that's probably normal, like our brains kind of getting in the way of the ever-present moment, but these devices make it exponentially harder. So it's intentionally setting that device away and like spending time with your person. But yeah, those are like my two like immediate, easy entry level ways to start fostering a connection.
So love languages. I remember reading that book, a few years ago. I forget who actually wrote it now, but yeah, there's 5 different love languages. And do you think that people should be like discussing that, like, say every few months? Because as you said, like it can change. Like for you, you said it's been like fairly consistent, but
Mhm.
should that be discussed? Like, say you meet someone and then I don't know, things get serious, maybe 3 months in, we'll say. Is that something that then like should be discussed and
I
then
think that's
maybe
a
like
first date. I don't think you
first
have to wait.
date?
Yeah, 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 because it's not that serious. It's not, and I think that there's an aversion to having those serious conversations right away. I mean, I think intimacy builds with vulnerability. So if I ask you a personal question, they've done this study to replicate falling in love, which is really interesting. So it's a 25-point questionnaire, and I'll ask you one question. It usually is pretty softball, like where'd you grow up, something like that. But each question gets progressively like more and more deep and more intimate. And then as you do that, and like each person opens up a little bit more and a little bit more, it has the same neurochemistry as falling into deep love with somebody. So you can do this on a first date. And I don't know where the advice was given, where it's like, let's just keep it surface level for however many weeks. You're not getting to know the person. So if you're dating with intention, if you're dating to find your forever person, I say like go all in. You should know right away if someone doesn't want kids. Because if you want kids, I mean, that's a huge, right? Just like don't waste anyone's time. So there's a way to present it where it's fun and it's light and you're actually curious about the other person. And there's a way to present it where you're like, my clock is ticking and I need to know, like, are you the one? Like, that's not going to work with anyone. That's going to scare off even a potential great match. But like approach it with like curiosity and playfulness. And I think you can have like these deep, meaningful conversations right away. And the love language thing, it's like a fun icebreaker too, because like maybe that first date's awkward and you're like, what do we talk about? And there's not really a flow. You can pull out your phone and I know this is going against my piece of advice earlier, but you're doing this activity together. And I think it's like a 5-minute thing. You can do it while you're waiting for your drinks or waiting for your appetizer and be like, oh, that's so cool. We're a match here. Or I've never met someone who likes words of affirmation. I'm really bad at expressing that. And maybe that'll be some like a point that you know that you're not compatible. So I don't know, it could be like a fun activity to get to know the person.
So is this questionnaire, is that directed towards or surrounded around the 5 love languages?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You just
Okay.
Google it and it'll come right up.
And for people who don't know, there's probably some people listening who don't know what the 5 love languages are. There's probably lots of people listening who don't know what they are. So maybe we should just list them. So it's acts of service, words of affirmation, um,
Quality
gifts,
time,
gifts, quality time, and then what's the last
physical
one?
touch.
Physical touch. There you
Mhm.
go. So yeah, those seem to be, that's like a theme that's just it seems to be coming up. Like if you listen to, any kind of podcast or read any books on relationships, it comes up over and over. But as you said though, like it can change over time. So like, do you find that like people should like revisit those questions or maybe even go back to that questionnaire? Or like, how do you sort of like approach that with like an evolving relationship? And I do agree with you that like, it probably is better to get those things out of the way at first because, 3 months is certainly a long time to waste on, someone if, it's not going to go anywhere. So, I do think that, I do agree with you in that it's better to have those conversations early. But is that something that, again, should be done like every 3 months or like, do you feel that like it's some kind of like should come up like organically and people should like recognize it in their partner or what's your sort of overall approach to like an evolving relationship with love languages?
Well, I would say that if you notice something feels off, let's say physical touch has always been your thing, and then you realize you don't like when your person's touching you anymore, and you're like, oh, like that used to be my favorite thing in the world, and now I'm kind of having like a repulsive or a repelled response to that. Maybe revisit it and see if your love language changed for that season that you're in, and if it didn't, I would say that there's probably something else to investigate with the relationship, and if this just goes back to intentionally maintaining the relationship as well. So if you notice the things that used to kind of light you up or the things that used to really adore about your partner have now kind of been, uh, you're now viewing with more of a critical lens, it means that the relationship hasn't been maintained properly. So if you have a piece of equipment or mechanics, for example, and you kind of like let that gunk build up and then you're like, oh, well, it was inevitable. The car was going to break. Well, no, you haven't been properly maintaining it. And there will get to a point where you have neglected that thing so much that it's beyond repair. So the thing is to kind of notice it and nip it in the bud really quick. And then you can reform that connection. But I find specifically with women, it's like subconsciously we bank all of these things that you guys do, quote, wrong or say, or like moments where we feel unsupported or abandoned or unsafe. And not like physically where it's an abusive relationship, just like these things can kind of show up subconsciously. So you not following through with something that you said you were going to, right? Like that is like a masculine trait. And every time you don't do that, she's like kind of subconsciously tracking that. And these things can build interest over time. And eventually it gets to a point where I think the woman kind of checks out. And then she'll be checked out for a really long time. And then whether or not she ends up leaving that relationship or that marriage is going to be dependent on, on the individual. But it's not going to be the same woman that you got into the relationship with. And you'll be like, where did her love go? Where did her spark go? Where did her playfulness go? And it's like, well, all of these things over time, if they're not maintained, are going to kind of chisel away at her essence, and that she's not going to show up how you want her to.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you brought that up because there was this kind of viral video. Maybe you'll be familiar with it, that came out maybe 12 months ago. I'm not sure how long it was, but there's this girl explaining, good morning texts, and how that, like, she wants good morning texts, and she wasn't receiving it, and then all of a sudden her boyfriend was like, okay, I'm going to start doing it. But then, as you just said, she was like checked out at that point. Like she wasn't into it anymore. Like she, at the end of the video, it was like, no, she just doesn't like you anymore. Is what she
Mm-hmm.
said. And so I guess it's something that, you have to do more or less on like a bit of a daily basis. And you have to recognize that you can't really like, compartmentalize like physical touch. Like it has to be like, just like, you walk by her just for 2 seconds, like, touch her. If she comes over and she hugs you, try to like hug her back. Like it doesn't seem like you can just be like, okay, like, no physical touch until like, 8 p.m. tonight. And then when I'm free, then I'll give you all the physical touch that you need. It seems to be like it has to be like sprinkled throughout the day, as opposed to
Yes.
say just like, given like all at once. Is that
Yeah.
something that you find most women more or less want?
Oh, absolutely. I think you want a whole bunch of touch points throughout the day, and not like physical, but just like presence. I think presence is the number one thing that women want in a man. So it's when you're with me, I have your full undivided attention, even if it's for a moment. Like if it is literally 3 seconds, and in that 3 seconds, I know that you're there with me. I think that investment into the relationship is massive. And so much of what we do is unconscious, or it's programming, or it's just habit. So like I'll walk by and maybe just like give you a graze, but I'm not like really there, right? Like there's not an intention in that. And I think we've all experienced being with somebody, whether it's like sitting on the sofa with them in conversation in an more intimate setting, where they're like there with you versus like they're kind of just there going through the motions, right? And one is exponentially more powerful than the other. So everyone is busy. Most of the time, both people are working full-time jobs outside of the house. And then you have to like kids at home. It's just, there's a lot of responsibilities that both people have. So it's like, if you have 2 seconds to be fully with someone, just like be fully with them. And if you find yourself going through the motions, like quickly like jump back into your body and just be there for a second.
And then, obviously what you want to do is like sprinkle, the love like throughout the day, and foster the connection. But when you do have like one-on-one time, when you're, at dinner or doing some kind of activity, do you think it's good just to like completely like put your phone away? Or like, is it something that, it's okay maybe to check every now and then? Or do you think that like you should just make like some kind of like hard rules, like, hey, when we're at dinner, just, put your phone away, and then that's it?
I think it's going to depend on the relationship, right? If you're dating a surgeon and he's on call, that's not going to be an option. Or if you're dating a lawyer and he's on call, that's not going to be an option. But I do think that you should have best practices. So if for some reason you can't completely get rid of the device, then you have it on silent and face up, and you can see who's calling you, if it pops up, if it's necessary or not. But at some point, you have to prioritize the relationship. It's not all the time, right? Like everyone has a full life. And I don't think any woman wants a man that his entire purpose is her, right? I think that could be suffocating. So you do want a guy that's driven and ambitious and has like these really lofty dreams, but you also want him to like honor, cherish, and be present with you at the same time. So it's all a balance, right? And the only person that's going to tell you if it's off kilter is you and your spouse, or you and your partner. So you have to check in with yourself and be like, am I doing a good job? Am I like spending my efforts equally across the board, or am I neglecting an area of my life? And you could be neglecting your work as well too, right? And that's not good for you. So constantly check in and then check in with your partner. So I think so much of the time we just assume once we get past like that honeymoon phase that that person's going to be there forever, especially if you get married, right? This is why you get deathbed, like marital deathbed. It's okay, this person just made a life sentence to me. It's till death do us part. I can do no wrong because like they are bound to me forever. Well, that's awful, right? Like that's, you should love the person and want to constantly be doing like 1% better every single day. So again, communication and being able to have a trusting environment to where if they do come to you and they say, yeah, you've been doing a shit job, or I do feel neglected, or I do feel that you don't see me anymore, that you can take that in a place where it's like with love and gratitude, and you guys have this union and their best interest is your best interest and vice versa. Like you want the other person to be thriving. And, you know, their betterment is yours as well. So not getting defensive is a big one. I think defense and contempt are like two of the worst things that you can have in a relationship, and I believe that they're two of the five, like a pot, like what is it, the or the four horsemen of the apocalypse, but it's like for a marriage, like that's two of them. So like try to avoid that in the relationship if possible.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson talks about contempt being, a really strong emotion and
Mm-hmm.
something that, needs to be addressed, and it can tell you, a lot about, not just about relationships, but about a lot of things. But just coming back to like, activities, like, a lot of people do go out to dinner, and that's, one of their, but it's not necessarily like an activity. It's just something that, both people maybe enjoy doing. But like, what kind of activities like do you suggest to people, if they want to start doing an activity together to kind of foster some kind of, connection, or, just increase the time that the quality time that they're spending in a relationship?
Well, novelty is huge. So Esther Perel talks a lot about this, and there is a school of thought that the reason that we lose that spark with our other person or that desire is because desire requires a certain level of mystery, a certain level of like angst a little bit. So once your person is like so demystified and you feel like you have them entirely figured out, like that's the beginning of the loss of like erotic love basically. So how do I maintain mystery with someone that I've been with for, a decade? Well, novelty. How do you introduce novelty? This could be going to a new restaurant. This could be trying something like indoor skydiving. This could be something like going on a weekend vacation someplace you haven't been. Anything that kind of like makes you maybe feel silly, like silly. You do an improv class. That sounds terrifying to me because I hate attention, especially like in groups where I don't know anybody. So like anything that kind of like makes you feel out of your comfort zone, I think is really good to do with your partner. Another one that's really interesting, Thomas Seeger. He's I think you've had him on.
I've had
I
them
don't know
on
if we
twice.
talked
Yeah.
about this when you were on my show or not, but one of the ways that you can also mimic falling in love with someone is going into an ice bath with them. So you go on either side of it, and you could do this in the tub, and I'm sure it would probably work in a shower. I don't see why not, because I think a big element of it is the discomfort. But you eye gaze, and then you make sure that you're touching. So whether it's like your knees or you're holding hands, and I think you want to be in there for at least 30 seconds while you do it. And that also starts releasing the same neurochemistry as deep love. So there's so many cool things you could do. I mean, I love working out with my person. Like I think that again, like it's that struggle and overcoming it with somebody and doing hard things and showing that you can be a good team, right? And be supportive and come out on the other end. I think all of those things are really good. Going out into nature. Again, anything that kind of puts you out of your comfort zone. Cooking dinner together. Like how many times do we make dinner and it's like so rushed and there's not really a lot of effort and it's just something that we have to do? Like how do you romanticize that a little bit? Like do you put on some really fun music and play with your lighting and do it together and set the table together and clean up together and like make it something that you want to do instead of something that you have to do? And I think that you can apply that across like all of your activities that you do throughout the day.
Yeah, I think like with going out to dinner too, one thing you can do, obviously not every day, it's probably not feasible, but like you can go to the grocery store together, like pick out the ingredients that you want, and then go home and, cook something maybe new. And as you said, like, it's challenging to find something new like all the time. You can still alter it. So maybe cook something new or something that you haven't had in a long time.
Hmm.
So I think I understand what you're saying about the novelty thing. And then it's interesting what you said too about, working out and like overcoming struggle, because, people always find it so odd that like, For example, like, we just had this Four Nations hockey tournament, and, it seems like all these guys who were on the team kind of almost like knew each other forever, even though they were just on the team for a week. But it's just that they overcame struggle together, and they were literally a team. And so it seems like it's like, like that team building aspect sometimes within these activities that kind of helps. And like you said, working out and like overcoming that struggle, like getting through those hard workouts like together. And then also too, you mentioned like the ice baths with that Tom P. Seeger was mentioning. Shout out to him. I love that guy.
I do too.
He's wicked. And so, it seems like that's something maybe that a lot of people, don't do together. Like maybe they will, play board games or, play cards or something like that. And then, cooking dinner is great, but it's not like that overcoming the struggle part. And I can see how, overcoming struggle together sort of, makes that sort of like team building, because you are a team. It's not like it's just like, like we think of team as like a hockey team or a football team, but, in a relationship, you are a team. So like, is it, you find that it's like that struggle part that like it really is satisfying for you, that gives you that sort of satisfaction when you do it together with your partner?
Yeah, one of the things I've done in the past that I found to be immensely powerful for my relationship was, it's called Principled Savage, and it's this close quarters combative training. And they do everything from like day to day. How do you get into the car? What do you do if there is an active shooter? How do you go through this obstacle course? There's knife work. You go and you roll on the mats and do jujitsu. It's like it's super
Wow.
super intense. Tim Kennedy also has something pretty similar. It's called the Protector 1 and Protector 2 course. And if you go as a couple, what you'll realize is it'll start to kind of unravel or rip open these emotional seams that you didn't know were there within the dynamic. So a lot of things I see is, and this kind of goes into polarity play, is who's leading the relationship. And this is going to be kind of triggering for a lot of people, because there's so many people that subscribe to this 50-50 model, and like we're equals, we're partners, it's 50-50. And if that's what you truly want and that works for you and everything's thriving in your relationship, keep doing it, right? Everyone is different. And I truly believe in curating your own relationship for it to thrive. However, I will say, if you are in this 50-50 dynamic, it is very hard to maintain sexual polarity to where there's that desire and that longing and that passion, because guess what? You're neutralizing the relationship when you do that. So I do think a relationship needs a dominant leader, and that might change depending on the area, right? Like let's say we're talking about kids and nutrition and the doctors and like those things. And usually that's mom's area, but I'm talking overarching theme of the relationship. I usually think it should be the man. That usually works out the best. So if you do this training with someone, I would find that I was not trusting the male to lead, and I was trying to lead, and I would get anxious if I couldn't see around the corner. And then that translates to how I behave in the relationship. So it's like, okay, well, how can I trust him to lead? How can I relax? How can I relinquish control? Or can't I, right? Like, or is there something deeper that's flawed in this relationship that needs to be revisited? So again, like it's when you apply pressure to something, you can kind of see how fortified it is or not. And even though it's something so specific, like doing a gun course, right? That translates to how I behave when we talk about finances, or when we talk about the schedule for the week, or whatever the thing might be. So I think you can introduce intentional stress points within the relationship to make it fun, but also as a way to audit the relationship and constantly improve it.
And do you think that because like you would go through something difficult, emotionally together, or even something that's just like, difficult to get through, like struggling with, like even if it's physical, then that kind of makes it easier when you have, real difficulties within the relationship, because you know that, hey, like, we've struggled through a workout together. Now we're having, an issue, some kind of fight. We should be able to maybe get through this fight together, and considering that we just, did a 3-minute cold plunge together or whatever it is.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's all a muscle, right? So you're building those neural pathways and those connections. So every time you do something difficult, the context matters, who you're with matters. So every time you do something difficult and you realize you can come out on the other side successful, you're training your brain like this is possible, right? So there are more emotionally weak people out there. They have a weaker mindset, a weaker constitution. They're not in control of their feelings. they're easily suggestible, they're the person that's screaming at the cashier at Whole Foods or their waiter because like the food came out wrong, right? Like that's an emotionally weak person. So every time that you do something that you don't want to do, every time you do something that's difficult and you force yourself to go, like when I do the cold plunge, it doesn't get easier. Anyone who does it will tell you it never gets easier. And I was doing it when it was snowing out the other day. So I take it out and the same voice comes into my head. It's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. It's cold. Would you just do a cold shower? Just skip it today. It's all of these excuses. And I immediately shut that voice up and I say, don't be a bitch. And I just jump in, right? I don't give myself an excuse. I just jump into and do the thing. So if you can do that, and you can do that whether it's something like a cold shower or it's going to the gym and you making sure you don't miss a workout, or it's looking at your finances even though you don't really want to because you're going to throw up, whatever it is, like make yourself do the hard thing. So then when life throws something at you, your brain's like, oh, we know how to do this, right? Like we can get over adversity. I can handle this stress and I can do this calmly and calculated instead of being reactive all of the time.
Yeah, voluntary adversity is like so important, for individuals, but also, for couples, it sounds like as well. And like, I think when you do that, when you like voluntarily do something, it just makes it so much easier than when something involuntary comes up because you know that, you've done something difficult before and you can overcome it. One thing that I wanted to ask you about was, there's a lot of women who want a man who's extremely ambitious. Like you've kind of, chatted about this already, a man who's really fit. And also too, though, and you've mentioned this too, like they want quality time, right? And so like, that stuff takes up a lot of time. Like if you want a man who, is really ambitious and, is able to provide in, ways like above and beyond, and then also is extremely fit, like that does take up time. And so like, how do you balance that also with like quality time? And is there almost a little bit of like sacrifice in there in some way, or is it just like understanding? Because there's some days, for example, like Mondays are probably and Tuesdays probably more my difficult days where like I'm in clinic for like from 9 to 6 and like there's no real like break in there. Like I'm just in there seeing patients, and then I do want to come home, and it does take me about 2 hours like from start to finish with regards to like workout, sauna, have a shake, get a shower, all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't leave, like that much time left at the end of the day. So, and again, it's not every day, it's just a couple days a week. But like, do you have like friends you have conversations with where it's like, I want a man who, is super ambitious, also super fit, but he's also just like busy all the time. I'm just not sure like, how he's going to have time for me.
I say this all of the time, and it's don't punish behavior that you want repeated. So if I love that you're fit, if I love that you're ambitious, if I want someone who's making 6 or 7 figures, right? I can't punish the behavior that leads to those things. So I can't then say, oh, why can't we ever just like order pizza and like you're always eating clean, or why do you have to go to the gym today, right? Because these are all the things that I fell in love with. These are all the things that I said I want. So I can't now hold you, like, I can't punish you for that behavior. On the flip side of that, it again goes to balance. So if you're neglecting the relationship and then you're only prioritizing those things, then why are you in a relationship? So at some point, I mean, yeah, you're going to get better gains if you're working out 6 or 7 days a week. But do you also want a relationship? So you have to find like that sweet spot of how can I still get the things that I want while not letting this relationship kind of wither on the vine. Conversely, I think women specifically, probably more than men, we want you guys to be everything to us all of the time. So we want you to be our best friend, our business partner, our lover, our comedic relief, our emotional support person, our financial security, our protector. Like we want you to do all of these things. And that is such a tall order. It's such a tall order to want out of one person. Like how do you, like that person doesn't exist. So I think also it comes to like women cultivating their own support system, which so many of us don't have. So find girlfriends, or if you have sisters, if you have like a mom that you're really close with, an aunt, like find like that female support system so that they can be the people that you divulge onto, like that you have that more cathartic emotional release when you have stressors, because it's interesting. Women tend to have stress reduction when we talk about our problems. Like our cortisol goes down. Men, it goes up. So you have, anytime you have a man and you're wanting to like say, these are all of our problems, or this is what's wrong with my day, and you feel better, well, you're actually depleting him when you do that. He doesn't want to do it. So, and obviously there's, there's outliers to this. So it's not true across the board, but overall speaking, like this is just the chemistry of the male versus the female brain. So you're now creating like this tension between the relationship. And again, it goes back to like depolarizing that union. So like, do you want to have passion and connection, or do you want a best friend that you can talk to? And I see a lot of women that are turning men into like their best girlfriend, and then they're wondering why the sex sucks. Well, maybe you should be doing this with your girlfriends. And it's hard when you're older and you have kids and you have a job. Like meeting friends is really difficult, or maintaining those friends, but you have to also invest in those relationships as well. And like, I think the more that you have, the more that you effort you put into being a whole person, the better your relationship is going to be, because you're not dumping everything onto one person to fill every single need. Like you're kind of outsourcing some of these other needs.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. And I think, I think men and women both find it, unattractive when the other person doesn't really have any friends, or doesn't, have like another sort of like outlet, so to speak, and people to talk to. And then, I've never really thought of it in that way, though, that like, you're sort of like outsourcing some of these emotions or some of these, conversations to other people. And of course, you should be able to talk about, your partner about anything. But at the same time, to be that person, like the only person, that's just like unrealistic, and it's too unfair on the other person. So I think that, it's important for, women to, have girlfriends, as you suggested. And then also too, like, what do you think about, I wasn't really gonna, mention this, but like, what do you think about like therapy? Because like, it seems that like women gravitate towards therapy, whereas like men are just like, oh my God, like that's the last thing I would ever want to do. And, I'd actually, I should know myself as a, medical doctor, that like, when you when women chat about their problems, their cortisol goes down, but, men, when it goes up, but like, it makes sense for me because like, sometimes like, if my fiance asked me, how my day went and I had like some really difficult patients or something, it's like, I already dealt with them. Like, I don't want to like talk about it again now. Like, like it's, and so, do you think that it's healthy then for women, I guess more so, to have like a therapist or someone, professional maybe they can talk to, or, in addition to their friends? Or do you think that, friends to be sufficient? Or like, what are your thoughts on, women going to therapy overall?
So this one gets me into trouble all the time because I don't love therapy at all. I think it does more harm than good a lot of the times. And again, there are going to be people in the comments that are like, it saved my life. That's beautiful. I'm so happy for you. I'm talking about people and relationship advice, and just like whether or not it's beneficial for a relationship, not like, I'm not talking about anything else at the moment. I think it can be beneficial to women if they find a good therapist. I personally like personal development coaches better, because there's no room for victim mentality. It's goal oriented, it's future oriented, it's very positive. It's not like wallowing, which I think a lot of psychologists are like, let's talk about your mother wound or your father wound, or like how did your mom yell at you when you were 5? Well, that's exactly why you have avoidant attachment, right? Like there's all of these excuses, and there's this quote where it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility, right? And I think that with a lot of therapy, it's finding fault. And it's finding a reason. And I don't necessarily think that the reason matters. It's like, I have this behavior that I don't want to do anymore. I have this mindset that I don't want to entertain anymore. So choose not to do it. And how can I do that? Maybe find, again, a personal development coach that will help you find some NLP practices that you can get in there, and you can get out of these like negative downward spirals. And then they'll help you kind of look for what they call an upward spiral, which is find the positive and the gratitude in these things. These are way more beneficial, in my opinion, than like, let's talk about our feelings, because I don't find that to be very productive. I think a lot of women don't want solutions. We just want to vent. And that's fine to a point, but at some point you have to say enough is enough, because now you're stuck in this rumination, and it's not healthy, because everything goes back to these like neurofeedback loops that you're doing. So if you're constantly talking about problems, That's all you're going to see. And that's all you're going to be training your brain to keep looking for. So how do I be more solution based? Again, men don't really thrive off of communicating about their problems. It actually tends to make it worse. I think men need to be respected, they need to be loved, and they need to be appreciated. And if they don't feel that they're getting those three things, then they're going to feel that the relationship sucks, or they're going to start to get depressed. So I think a really easy way to fix the relationship is, am I talking to him like a fool or a king? Right. And if I'm constantly pointing out his like shortcomings or his flaws, that's going to translate into, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And he's going to start being more of that fool. If I start talking to him with respect, love, admiration, I'm showing him gratitude, I'm like letting these things be known, he's going to do more of that. So, yeah, I think that is going to help a man exponentially more than going and sitting on a sofa with someone. And it might be hard because you might be really fucking pissed at him. And you're like, well, you don't understand. He didn't take the trash out for the 10th time in a row. Okay, well, maybe invite him in a different way to do it instead of like condemning him or nagging him or ridiculing him. And there's like different ways to get the thing that you want. So
Or
that
get
would be,
emails like I do. I just get an
you
email
get
every
an
week.
email?
I've been doing it for like 10 years, so I never ever miss the trash because I get an email every morning. I'm like, okay, now I know it's trash day today,
Hmm.
so I got to go out and do it. But yeah, little things like that can be helpful. But another thing too, you're dead on. Like there was a study that came out about a week or two ago. I haven't posted about it yet, but it basically said that like bottling up your emotions to a certain degree is actually beneficial. Like people who talk about their problems and stuff all the time, it actually makes things worse overall. Whereas if you like, because ultimately, like when people talk about like healing, like ultimately, like the goal there is just moving on, right? Like once you moved on and you're no longer thinking about it anymore and it's no longer affecting your life, then essentially, and again, that word healing is sort of bothersome in some ways, but like
Hmm.
just say that like, you've healed from it. Well, it was never really an issue. You didn't pay attention to it and you just moved on to something else. And so, I think, the science is kind of backing up like exactly like what you're saying right now. And I think that, we do live, unfortunately, in a society of like, victim culture and like going to therapy. And like the other thing too is like you're talking about yourself the whole time, which is, in some ways like selfish, right?
Hmm.
Whereas, if you're, not talking about yourself, you're doing something different, you're trying to, better your life in some way, or as you said, like, working with like a personal development coach, then you're more talking about like goals and activities and things that need to be improved. Whereas like, when you're in therapy, you're talking about like, oh, this is the way, I am. And now I understand, why I am the way I am. And it's like, okay, so you understand why you are the way you are, but how is that actually making your life better? Like, I'm not really familiar with exactly when you're talking about like a personal development coach. Like I have some kind of idea, but like I imagine that like these people would be talking about more like goals and activities and things to improve on. Is that what
Hmm.
usually is discussed with those types of people?
Yeah, because it's more action oriented. So you can, sure, if you're having like a shitty day or we got into a fight, like it's not off limits to talk about that. But the correct response in that kind of dynamic is going to be like, okay, well, now what do we do? Now what do you want to do about that? So I think again with therapy, there's like so much just talking and so much inaction, and then that leads to like neuroticism, right? And it's again, you're being inundated with like me, and all of my problems. Just like you said, it's really selfish. You're gonna get stuck in that loop, and then those problems are gonna be exacerbated. So, okay, feel it. I'm not saying like bypass it, like feel the thing. But now, what am I gonna do to fix the situation? I know I don't like this about my current circumstance. Now, what's the next like small action item I can do to move one step forward? Because maybe it's a really big problem. Like maybe you're going through a divorce or something, and then that can be like a fucking hurricane. What's the next small step I can do, right? Like an action item that I can do. Or if you're trying to fix the relationship, what is the next small thing I can do to repair the relationship? Like maybe you can't fully be intimate with that person again because like the relationship is like so tumultuous, but can we go on a date? Can we sit on the couch together and have a glass of wine? Can we talk about something positive instead of our problems for a minute? Can I try to see the good in this person again? Like, what is like this next small step I can get to for the thing that I want on the other side instead of just feeling your feelings?
What do you think about couples doing psychedelics together and maybe sort of having like, a small like therapeutic session? Again, I say this with like, a medical disclaimer, that kind of thing. I'm not telling people to do psychedelics, but, what do you think of people doing like, a small amount of MDMA like together and maybe, not necessarily even chatting about their problems because, if you're doing MDMA, let's face it, you're probably in a pretty good mood, but like, do you think that could be beneficial for people, or do you even see that as maybe a little bit of like a crutch?
I think you would be surprised about what you would talk about on MDMA. And even if so, you can look at what they're doing with couples or what they're doing with military vets. They get into some really heavy topics. Like there is crying, there is sobbing, there's a lot. And what it does, I think there's this confusion that you do MDMA and it is like this party drug, it's euphoric, it's amazing. It's a heart opener, right? So what it's doing, it's allowing you to feel everything in a place of non-judgment and with the best possible intentions of it. So you can now look at something that was like super traumatic, like maybe you were in war, or maybe there was like some kind of physical abuse, or maybe like whatever the thing is, and you can revisit this from this heart-centered place. And then you're essentially rewiring your brain to where it's not going to have like that, you're not going to have like that PTSD or those flashbacks, and it's not going to be like stored in your somatic system the way that it was. So you can get into some like really intense topics, but I think if you do it with couples and you have to say like, well, what are my intentions going into this? Like, are we doing it because we are thriving, we're in a good relationship? And a lot of couples will do this on their anniversary every year to just like reconnect and celebrate. That's one modality. I think that's beautiful. If you're going to do it, obviously make sure you're taking all of like the precautionary steps to make sure that everybody is safe. If you're going to do it because there are issues within the relationship, and this is happening a lot. I actually have a really good friend and he does this. He travels all around the world and he works with very prestigious couples and politicians and dignitaries, and he's doing like immense work with couples. If you're doing it because you're trying to solve, fix, figure out what's wrong with the relation or what you should do with the relationship, I highly recommend having a trained, respectable facilitator, like not doing it by yourself. I think you need a third party there to kind of make sure that everyone is doing the best practices, approaching everything with like no blame, and that like anchoring is a really big part of it, which we can get into at the end of this long monologue. But essentially what you do is you would have a facilitator there. A lot of them do parts work, so we're going back kind of into therapy, but the reason that they do this, it's like to kind of separate yourself from the event. And in that way, you're kind of like getting it out off of like your chest, off of your system, and like kind of taking the charge away from it. It's less personal when you do this. So even though, again, I'm not a huge fan of therapy, I do think it works in the psychedelic space, and I think it keeps everything more effective. So you can talk about if someone cheated, and it's not going to be like this, like what you typically see where there's like blame and shouting and what, like it's like, oh, I love you so much, why did you hurt me? And the other person's like, I love you so much. And like you can kind of get into the problems from a more like heart-centered loving space, and at the end of it you can be like, is this repairable or not? And you'll feel it. I don't know how to explain it. I've done two. One was with my husband, one was by myself because I wanted to have like an experience that wasn't affected by anyone else. So what they do at the end of it is it's this thing that they call anchoring. So what is the highest version of my future that I could possibly want? And it's kind of like planting a subconscious seed. Or so you could take this fear. Mine, like one of my biggest fears is like ending up broken, homeless under a bridge. It makes no sense. It's just a scarcity thing. It's a survival thing. And it's been something since I can remember. So how would I go in and anchor like my most elevated, abundant version of my future? Or I'm going to end up alone. Okay, well, what is like the highest like version of me when I'm 100 years old? Like how do I like replace that fear with something much better? So they'll help you do that as well. And with his program specifically, I would say more couples than not end up fixing and repairing their relationships, even really intense ones that were on the verge of divorce. And then some were like, you know what, with all the love in my heart, we're just not good anymore, and they can walk away. And it's not this wild divorce where everyone's at each other's throats, right? It's getting back into a place of like love, kindness, and seeing the other person for like the whole beautiful person that they are, and just recognizing the relationship doesn't work anymore. So I think if you do it the right way with a facilitator and it's safe, and both people go in with the best intentions just to find the truth of the situation, I think it's powerful. I think people that are doing it loosey-goosey and they're just, let's just take this and see what happens, I don't find that to be helpful. And then the caveat is as well, if you have a facilitator that isn't experienced or isn't ethical, that could actually be detrimental to the relationship, because I've seen that too. So if you feel called to it, I would explore it. I would find some good facilitators. Anyone who's interested in it, please like hit me up and I can send you some amazing facilitators that I would recommend. But yeah, it's one of those things I can't like advocate for unless someone feels called to it, because psychedelics are one of those things that are immensely powerful, but you do see some people bypassing it because like they'll just do psilocybin or they'll go to the jungle for a week and do ayahuasca, and they're like, I have all of the codes to the matrix, you have to listen to me. Well, now actually you have a super ego and you are so detached from this human
I've
experience
seen that
that
too.
it's actually way worse. So it's, how do I take this experience and know it was just for me, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
apply to everyone else. You had the experience, that information was for you and your relationship. Now, how can I take that and implement it in a practical way moving forward? Not like, I'm going to go dance with dragons for the rest of my life and everyone listen to me. Like, no. That you're missing the whole point.
Yeah, I agree that there's nothing more annoying than someone who just did psychedelics for the first time and then wants to tell everyone, how to live their life a week later. I've
Mm-hmm.
definitely seen that before.
Oh, yeah.
But also too, on a more serious note, like I do think that this should be more readily available to people. Like it's unfortunate that, it's still more or less, unless you find someone like an underground kind of therapist, we'll call them, it's still more or less only, available to people through clinical trials, which is, really unfortunate because
Mm-hmm.
there's just so much research out there now indicating this can be, incredibly powerful for, not just couples, but like veterans with PTSD, in particular. Like, I think after just a few sessions, like there was a MAPS trial that showed that like 2 out of 3 people didn't even meet the criteria for PTSD anymore, which is amazing. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, thanks for sharing that. I didn't know you had all that experience. So I'm glad that I asked you that today. Just coming back to, texting, because this is something that comes up a lot in relationships. And like, I've kind of, thought this before and said this out loud in my, relationships, like, why do I have to like text you throughout the day? Like, 20 years ago, this didn't even exist. And like, I'm 40 years old. So I'm just, barely kind of old enough to have relationships where like, there was no texting involved, it was just calling them on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
But, now that we have this technology available, there's sort of like this new, I guess, like expectation for people to kind of like check in throughout the day. So do you think that's like fair and reasonable for, women and men to maybe, expect like 1 or 2 texts throughout the day? Or like, do you think it's okay to, have like a 9 to 5 job and then, not chat with the person throughout the day or not let them know how you're doing or check in?
Yes. 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 So I think both. And there's this it might have been Mel Robbins that said this, and she was saying how she doesn't like the word needy. And I would always see these women that I would call needy, and I'd be really judgmental about it because I'm not like that at all. Like I could go all day and not talk to my person as long as if I know, like, I trust you, you're working, you're doing your own thing, you're going to come home to me and we'll have time. So I would see people that need text constantly, like every 30 minutes, every hour. And I'm like, oh, you're so needy. Sure, we all have needs, right? Like they're just different. So if you are someone that has the need to constantly be reassured, whatever the reason might be, to me, that is like anxious attachment, but we won't go there. If that is your need and you're upfront with it, then I think it's the other person's responsibility to say, I'm willing to meet that need or I'm not willing to meet that need. So the person, they're telling you exactly what they want, what they need in the relationship. And if you're going to be able to, I guess, like fulfill that or not, it's up to you. So again, it's recognizing we're not all compatible. And I don't know why that's wrong either. It's almost like we find this person and we're trying to force this puzzle piece to fit instead of saying, you know what, that is way too clingy for me. It annoys me. I'm busy. I don't have the time to do that, nor do I want to do that. That's okay too. You're allowed to say that. Guess what? Not a good fit, and just move on. So I think when you have something like that, I think it's great that someone can be honest about their need and then they're saying that. But I think the other person also has a responsibility to say, am I going to fulfill that? Do I want to fulfill that? Which is the more important thing. Cause like you could be willing to do it and then build up that resentment because you think it's annoying. Like if you don't want to do it, you shouldn't, I don't think. So both people just being honest with what they want and expect out of their relationship.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that discussion because, it is sometimes like a point of contention in many relationships. And like I said, it's kind of odd that like, this wasn't even a thing that people could do 20 years ago. So it didn't even come up. But now it seems to be like, again, a point of contention in a lot of relationships is like checking in throughout the day.
I would also ask those women too, like, do you want to be like that? So again, and it goes back to being like more action oriented and goal oriented. So instead of saying like, this is anxious attachment because my parents weren't there or I was constantly left with a different caregiver, explain it, right? You can explain it away until like you're blue in the face. That doesn't help. So do I want this behavior? Is this serving me? Do I feel good about it? Do I feel secure? Or am I constantly an emotional mess and that's why I'm doing it? Do I want to continue to or not? And if the answer is no, this isn't serving me, or no, I no longer want to do this, then there are things you can do to try to secure that relationship within yourself. The other person's not going to be able to fix that. They could text you, they could live stream you all day, and I would bet you would probably still have that anxious feeling. So I would challenge women to investigate that and see if you want to keep it or not. And if you don't, there's plenty of work you can look up when it comes to attachment styles to start making decisions and actions that will get you away from that behavior.
Yeah, I think it can be over bearing sometimes,
hmm
and just like something that can really disrupt people like throughout the day. Like I like to be focused throughout the day. I don't really especially when I'm at work. Like I kind of have to have all my mind on my patients, and that's it. And so it's kind of hard for me to go back into that sort of love circle or love space and then get back right into patients. Like, maybe you have a different kind of job, it might be a little bit easier if you're different personality. But for me, when I'm at work, I like to be just at work and that's it, and that's what works for me. But getting to know your partner, like one thing I've seen come up a few times recently, and I've never thought about this at all, but do you think it's important for a man to know a woman's cycle and to treat her differently throughout that cycle so he can understand why she's feeling a certain way?
Oh my gosh, yes. I think that could be one of the biggest game changers in any relationship. So it's so funny because there's a lot of men that are critical about women and feminism and how what women have become more masculine, but then they do something that is like the epitome of femininity, which is experience a cycle or have these big swings, and they're like, why can't you just be more stable? Well, now you're asking her to behave more like a man. So like, which one do you actually want? And if you want her to be able to express like all of that beauty that is her femininity, that's going to come with these storms because we have cycles. So unless you're dealing with someone who's, postmenopausal, you're going to have to deal with like 3 to 4 different personalities a month. And for some women, depending on how balanced their hormones are, like those swings could be like really small and almost undetectable, or they can be massive, right? This is important for women to know too, because like if you are experiencing like a ton of pain, for example, like maybe you should be looking at your progesterone, and like just taking one pill before your cycle can make a huge difference in how you experience PMS and how you experience your cycle. So, I mean, there's benefits for the relationship, but also just like pragmatically, there's benefits. Um,
But
if you,
just at that point too, not to interrupt
no, go
there,
ahead.
I've like really helped, a lot of women just by using, progesterone like on days 15 to 25. They take a little bit before they go to bed. It helps them sleep better and it just helps ease everything. They even have like less like physical pain, like less cramping. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, but go ahead,
No,
Candice.
yeah. I mean, it's beautiful to like the more information you have, it's like you can really kind of take ownership over your reality. Um, so it's if you know where she's at with her cycle, I think it's also easier for you not to take everything so personal. You can be like, oh, okay, she's on like, I don't know, day 28 or whatever, and like this is going to be her behavior. It's not about me, and then I can know to like approach her in a more gentle way. Or I know that
Instead
this
of
is
saying, are you on your period? Which is
right.
not
Instead of
going to
doing that,
go
that's not going to
well.
help at all. Right now, you just went to war with a bear. Like, good luck with that one. But you can know when she's in her like her fertile window, and you're gonna know she's gonna be more playful and she's gonna want to go out and want to like be seen, and like that's gonna be beneficial to you too because like the romance is gonna be there. If you know that it's like right before her period, she's gonna want to be more introspective. She's gonna want more quiet time, especially if you have kids and you're doing other things. It's like, how can I help support her in this to make the whole house just run more smoothly? And it's not an excuse for women to be tyrants. Like, you can't be like, I'm on my period, so like I have a get out of jail free card. You still have to practice mindfulness and intention and try to mitigate those things as much as you can. Because like I don't think your husband should be your punching bag at the same time. But it's, again, if you're looking at everything like from a union and how do we both make each other better? How do we both thrive together, your interests or my interests? Then you should be invested in her cycle, because then you're going to be able to kind of navigate those waves a little bit more, like a little easier.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think that, the more about her, then the more you'll be able to like understand like why they're behaving a certain way. And that goes with like anything. Like even when I see like, a difficult patient in my practice, and even when they're behaving, potentially poorly, sometimes you just have to think to myself, well, if I had their life circumstances, I'd probably, feel the same way that they do too. And so, that you have to have that same sort of like attitude when, a woman's going through her cycle. You have to understand that like hormones are real, and hormones really do, change how we think and how we behave. And so, the better you understand that, I think the better you're able to, treat the person, and obviously the better for the relationship overall.
And even with your workouts too, like if you're planning your workouts around your cycle, if you're, I want to say it's like while you're bleeding, like that's actually when you want to be lifting heavy weights. Like that's when it really surprised me, but like you actually have a lot more strength during that, and you can do like the more high cortisol activities. I think coming off of it, you want to be a little bit more relaxed, because if you're not in sync with your cycle, what you're going to do is you're going to like make your cortisol go through the roof. And then you're like, I'm working out, I'm doing all this HIIT training, and I can't get rid of this belly fat. It's because your body thinks that you're going to die. So it's like, as a woman, we have to hold on to our fat reserves, because our entire purpose is, like, biologically speaking, is to recreate life. So if your body and your nervous system thinks that the outside environment is unsafe because you're constantly inundated with stress and you're loading that onto your cycle, well, guess what? You're going to be maintaining a lot more fat than you want to. So everyone needs to know women's cycles. So the world would be a better place.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point too. I have heard some women chat about that recently, like training differently, throughout their cycle, maybe doing like zone 2 cardio, certain days instead of, doing like the high intensity stuff, because it can make a difference overall. So yeah, really good point on that. Coming back to just like, technology in relationships, I've seen some people lately, I've chatted with one friend in particular who said that like he's used ChatGPT in his relationship. He's gone on ChatGPT, put in things, and he said like it's come out better. He like, chatted with his partner about it, and like even his partner said like, yeah, like you should like use that more often. Like, have you heard about this, or do you think that it can be, beneficial for people overall? Or do you think it's kind of like odd to like, leverage technology, I guess, in some ways, to like better your relationship?
I think we're always using technology and leveraging it in some kind of way. You just don't want it to take over and become autopilot. So I think everything in moderation tends to be the answer. For men, I think I've seen a lot of men doing this. I don't know many women that are doing this, or I'll see women that kind of behave like men doing this, but it's more of like a masculine tendency to like problem solve and get a solution or get an answer, right? So that's why they're going to ChatGPT and like,
Yes.
if she's behaving this way, what do I do? Or what does this mean, right? So you guys are trying to figure out a solution to something. I think that's wonderful. I want my man to try to understand me more. And if he has a resource that's going to help him, I'm all for it. Again, you just don't want it to be the default. So you can take the information and filter it through you, right? And like how you want to present it or what you want that to mean for the relationship. Don't just regurgitate it blindly without it having any kind of meaning. But I think it's great. My husband uses it a lot for parenting stuff. So he'll look up stuff with, how do you deal with this developmental milestone? And I think that's beneficial as well. So yeah, use your resources. But I would say like if you're going to use ChatGPT to try to like romance your woman, I don't know how good it's going to be at the more emotional side of things. But I think for problem solving, or if you're going to ask it about cycles, for example, to tie that back in, like that would probably be beneficial. So it's just know when the tool is applicable.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's, reasonable advice because, you do want to leverage technology. All of us are leveraging technology all the time. Like we're on a podcast today, which, wasn't really available 10 to 15 years ago, which enables us to just put out information, that kind of thing. Why not use ChatGPT sometimes as long as it doesn't turn you into like a robot? And also too, don't rely on it. Like, if it says it like this is the answer. So like, whatever you say, if you feel that like, if you have a different opinion, chat GPT, like that's still okay. It's
Hmm.
not going to be right like 100% of the time. Um, One thing I want to ask you about seems like a lot of guys are really embarrassed or they won't tell their girlfriend or their fiance, their wife, if they're using Viagra or if they're using Cialis. Is that something guys should be, afraid of telling? Or do you think that like that's a turnoff for girls? Or what are your overall thoughts on that?
So I think women get turned off because they think, why am I not enough? Like, what, like you obviously don't find me sexy or desirable. So we make it, women internalize sexuality a lot where men externalize it. So men like see things, you're visual, and your sexuality is dependent on like your external world, where ours is more like narcissistic and internal. So I am going to have a harder time being aroused if I don't find myself attractive, right? So if I think that you don't think I'm attractive, now I don't think I'm attractive, and now we're going to have really bad sex. So if I think that you need a pill to have sex with me, I'm going to make it all about me. In reality, and you're going to be probably much more of an expert on this than I am, but because it's a vasodilator, it's actually really good for your heart. It's good for longevity that new studies are showing. So what I've heard is men, especially like 40 and up, should be taking like 1 or 2 a week just for longevity purposes. And it's obviously off script, but we do that all the time, right? Like metformin is being used for longevity studies, controversially, right? Because there's the whole issue with like the mitochondria when it comes to taking it too many days and working out. But we use things off label all the time. So you can do 2 things. You can just take it and not tell her, right? Because I don't see an issue with that. I don't think that's lying. It's just you're not. Do you tell her that you're taking a vitamin D K2 pill? Probably not. It's the same thing. So I don't know that you necessarily need to disclose that, but if you want to, you can express it that it has nothing to do with her. She may or may not believe you. And you can maybe show her some of the studies on how it is helping with blood circulation, heart health, and longevity. I had Derek from More Plates, More Dates on a while back,
I love
and
Derek.
he's great. And he
Yeah,
was
he's
talking
awesome.
about the importance of having morning wood. So I think a lot of women traditionally were like, oh, you just wake up horny. What's the matter with you? Like, whatever. Like, no, it's actually, it has to do with blood flow. And if you have that main femoral artery that's right there. So men, you want to be waking up with morning wood almost every day, regardless of your age. The minute that starts to kind of be more days off than on, you now have a blood flow issue that's going to lead to mobility issues, that can lead to hip issues, that can lead to a hip replacement, right? So all of these things matter if you're trying to live to like 100 years old, which I think most of us are right now. Like everyone's biohacking and trying to like optimize
For sure I am.
longevity and lifespan. So present it that way. But I do think most women are going to be ignorant to the health benefits of it. So if you are going to disclose it, come prepared, come with your notes and show that it has nothing to do with like your attraction to her. It is just, it's health.
Yeah, and one of the big ones too is also nocturia or just like not peeing at night.
Mm.
So I had Kyle Gillette on my podcast, or Dr. Kyle Gillette, I should say. He's been on Andrew Huberman twice. He's like a genius, and he said that it can reduce, nocturia or nighttime peeing by about 50%, which
Wow.
is pretty incredible. And it's actually used now in combination drugs. So like, sometimes, for blood pressure, like they'll put like 2, pills or 2, yeah, I guess we can call it 2 pills with 2 different mechanisms of action in one. And so they're actually doing that now for men with BPH or, with enlarged prostate. So yeah, there are a ton of, benefits to it. So talked about Viagra. What do you think about guys shaving their pubic hair? Do you think that it should be completely clean? Do you think that they should leave it? Or do you think that it should be like, half they shave it? Like what do women find to be like most attractive overall?
I have no idea what women like. I know what I like. I like some hair. I don't want it to be bald. I feel like that's weird to me, but that's both ways. I don't like anything bald. I like everything just like landscaped, manscaped. So it's not I'm not like hunting for something. I want to just like it's there and I'm not going to get, anything in my mouth, but like just like trimmed, just trim it,
Trim sounds good.
just trim.
So I know I only got you for a few more minutes, and I know you're into biohacking quite a bit. Obviously we talked about the cold plunges. Psychedelic therapy in some ways is kind of like a biohack to some degree. You could easily call it a major biohack for a lot of different things really. But anything new that you've been doing recently that you think is worth sharing?
Biohacking wise, so I have a red light mask and like neck thing, and I try to do that a few times a week. And I actually keep my eyes open now because they're showing that it actually helps reduce macular degeneration by having red light exposure, which they used to say the opposite. They would say that it would be harmful. So now I keep my eyes open when I do that. What else do? I do BPC. What is it? That
157.
peptide. Yep. So I take that every morning. I was doing
Orally, or do you do it injection?
orally. Mm-hmm.
And you do it on an empty stomach?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's mostly just for like gut health you do that for? Or?
It's supposed to help with, I think like maintaining like lean muscle mass as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do that. I stopped taking metformin. I was actually doing that for a really long time. And then I was listening to Dr. Sinclair about it specifically. And I think he was bringing up, and so is Huberman, that if you are someone who works out, that it could actually be negating the gains that you're getting from weightlifting. So if you're someone who's inactive, it would be beneficial. If you're someone who's active, it's actually slowing down the rates of hypertrophy. So you're not going to be able to be building muscle as much as you want. So that's going to be like one of the biggest game changers if you want to live for a really long time, is how much lean muscle mass can you keep up. I do a lot of kettlebell workouts. So like functional movements, I think, are really big. So like the boring workouts that aren't like sexy, like everyone wants to do like squats and bench and like all of these things that just look more traditional, but like farmer's carry or a dead hang, like grip strength is one of the biggest indicators for longevity. So can you hold yourself, like hang from a bar for a minute? And until you can do that, you're probably going to be in trouble down the road. So it's like, how do you make small improvements with that? So weights, red light therapy, cold plunge.
Cool. Do you know how many joules per centimeter square you're getting with your red light, like on your face?
I can probably look that up on the thing. What is the one?
Because I had to figure this out, the other day. Just because I wasn't sure if I was getting too much, but you're probably getting quite a bit, because even if it's like very low intensity, the thing is that it's right on your face. And so the further it is away from you, it becomes like significantly less powerful.
Oh, mine is like you wear it. It's like
Yeah,
on
you
your,
wear it. That's
yeah.
what I mean. So like you're probably getting like a ton of it. And then the other thing too about the red light therapy, there was a study that came out, I think it was late December 2023. And I couldn't believe the results of it, because I always thought that, exercise, there's nothing better than exercise for preventing cognitive decline. And it actually showed that red light therapy was superior. So it's pretty incredible what that's doing. So imagine when you have it on your face, it's also like on your forehead. So it's getting into like your brain.
Well, actually, so if you want, we can go back to like what is something I'm doing that is like new in the longevity space. This is going to be more applicable to women. They make red light wands now. So you insert it into your vagina, and it's all the way around, and you can like move it around as far as you want, or like you can do isolated spots. And what it helps with, it's postmenopausal women. It helps to regenerate the tissue in there. It helps with incontinence. It helps with pelvic floor health if you've had babies, or just general age in general. And your pelvic floor is one of the most important pieces of health, especially for women. If that is like constantly contracted, or if it's too loose and it's weak, that's going to show up in your stomach, and you're going to actually have like that bulging tummy. And it has nothing to do with fat necessarily. It's because those muscles, your core is like a corset. So if that pelvic floor is really weak for whatever reason and it's dumping, it's going to kind of make everything expand a little bit. So that leads to low back pain, right? Chronic low back pain, or hip issues, or balance issues. Balance, you can fall. So I would say a hack that some women should look at. And if you've had a baby, if you're 35 and up, check out a red light wand and start improving your health. I think
That's good. That's cool because like pelvic floor therapy, like Huberman did a full podcast on that. And for guys, that's can cause ED, and it can also cause excessive urination as well if you don't have strong pelvic floor muscle. So, if you are symptomatic, I know it's uncomfortable to do, for guys, because yeah, you got to get someone to basically put their finger right up there. But
you could do
it's
Kegels. You could do them by yourself. So men, look up Kegel videos. Everyone thinks it's just for women. Men should be doing Kegels too. And you could do it in the privacy of your office or your room or in the shower. Just grab your phone and look up some Kegel videos, and the woman will tell you how to do it, right? And you'll be like, oh my God, that's hard.
Yeah, and it will, again, improve those symptoms if you are experiencing them, which is pretty awesome.
I'm trying to find the
So
numbers for this mask. So the thing is, most, and you can probably attest to this, most red light therapy is trash, because like if you're getting it off Amazon, you want to make sure that the volts are like the wattage is within a certain range. If not, you're not getting any benefits and you just wasted a bunch of money. The one I use is very expensive for the mask. It's by Shawnee Darden, Darden. And it's pricey. It's going to run you about $2,000. But again, like you're paying for the results. You don't want to waste $500 and do something that's not doing anything. So if you're going to do it, do the right thing. But I don't know where I would see.
it's actually doesn't, I don't think we'll give you that on the like in the description there. It's
Mm,
something that you generally have to calculate. But
uh,
what I would suggest is like put in basically the time, the voltage, and then how far away it is from your face,
mm,
and that should give you a rough idea as to how many joules per centimeter squared you're getting. But do that on Chat GPT. That'll make it all easy for you. And
okay.
then yeah, you don't want to be above like 60 joules per centimeter squared a day, and the optimal range is about 40 to 60. That's
Mm,
where you get like the skin benefits are actually, I think, are pretty low. Like I think it's somewhere like you only need maybe 10 to 20. Don't quote me on that, but it's pretty low. But for like the more like the mitochondrial benefits,
hmm.
it's a little bit higher. And so yeah, I think the optimal range is between about 40 to 60. But anyways, I know we're kind of past time here now, Candice, but I really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much for answering all my questions. Just let the people know, where they can find you on Instagram, Twitter, your podcast, and anything else that you want to share.
So you can go to chattingwithcandice.com. That has all of my socials. And then most of my handles across the board are just Candice Horbacz.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Okay, Candice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it again. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And as always, I'll be back with another episode next week.